to The Christian View. I'm Dr. Trudy, your host, and I have along with me Monica Matthews, Dr. C, Dr. Christina, Pastor Lee Adams, and Aisha Diaz. I said it wrong. Denzi. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But anyway, thank you all for being here today. I'd love for you just to look them up on their websites and social medias. They're doing amazing things in the kingdom, and so just give you more of understanding of who they are. So go check out their websites. So I'm driving in today, and it's raining. And I'm trying to stay in my lane, and there's a lady behind me honking her horn, just out of control, and she's weaving in and out of traffic. She gets up right beside me, and she starts yelling at me with the window up. She's yelling at me, and it made me think about our topic today, which is, where is the lack of mercy and grace in our society today? I mean, if you scroll through social media, you'll see attack after attack of people attacking each other, demanding that they lose their jobs, destroying their reputations, and their positions in our world. It's kind of out of control. Yeah. I mean, there was a recent case in Kentucky about a student in Kentucky, and they were berating him before they knew all the facts.
Wow.
So it's kind of getting out of control, Aisha. What do you think? Do you think that we're just so quick to be angry and so quick to judge that there's no room for mercy and grace?
I think we have a tendency to look for the negative things in every situation, in each other, or just, in the world, before looking for the positive things. And I think it's become infectious in that way. And we're all starting to just, instantly jump on what's negative. And I think Romans 3:23 and 24, for we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That in itself says that how could you call out, or how could you belittle anyone, or think that you're better than anyone, when we all have fallen short in some sense in our lives. And maybe because of our own insecurities, that we're often looking for the faults and what's wrong with everyone else.
Right.
But if you just focus on yourself, you will find out you don't even have time.
You really don't have time if you're focused on
anybody
yourself.
else's issues or their faults.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I find it easy to condemn when we're not reflective. When we don't begin to look and begin with looking at ourselves and looking at our own shortcomings and our failures, and putting ourselves in the place of how would I want somebody to respond to me if this was going on and I was the person on the other side of this. But I think it's harder to relate to people when you don't have compassion. And I think that's what we've lost so much in society. People just don't have compassion anymore.
Lack of compassion.
Well, what about, we're judging people for things they did 20 years ago. And we're holding them up, in a judgment seat of things that they've done 20 years ago. And it may even be in the news, even taken out of context, but it's making them lose their jobs.
Yeah, so being a media personality, it's a fine line that I walk daily to not placate and pander to that narrative of, executioner and judge according to public courts. And so I'm constantly reminding my audience to guard your heart, right? Because Matthew 24:12 says that due to lawlessness that will increase, men's hearts will wax cold.
Right.
And so I think media pushes the narrative, and now we're seeing a lot of things uncovered in politics where we're like, okay, there's not a whole lot of accountability where our leadership and our elected officials are concerned. And that, I think, fosters and cultivates a sense of helplessness and despair. And so we take it out on each other. Our hearts wax cold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we live in a society where we're very quick to throw the rock and hide our hands. But the Bible declares that, if you can't show mercy, then you shouldn't obtain mercy. And so I don't think people think about that. If you want mercy, you have to give mercy. And as Aisha stated, all of us have something. We all have some bones rattling in our closet somewhere that we don't want people to know about. And so if you want mercy, you've got to learn how to cover first with the love of Jesus Christ.
Well, Lee, do you think we're not teaching it as much in the church anymore? Has it kind of lost its, I don't want to use the word power, but that's what I'm thinking of. Mercy and grace, there's power in humbling ourselves and showing mercy where mercy is due. But have we lost that?
I think so. I think the premise of most churches now is more on the prosperity and how to become, great and famous. But God is teaching us, we forget that He starts off by telling us, judge ye not, that ye not be judged. And then also He teaches us that to the pure, all things are pure. And when we're looking at things through the right eyes and with the right lens and looking at people for who they truly are, and as being human, knowing that we were born in sin, shaped in iniquity, we've come with a lot of frailties. We're going to make mistakes, but you know, His compassions they're new every morning. His mercy. So we got to understand that, you know, He gives us another chance. So why can't we extend it to someone else?
Right. And that's a good question we need to ask. Why can't we?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think too, I love this definition in this small group that I'm currently participating in. Mercy equals being relationally generous.
Yes.
And so if we're missing it in our churches, I think it's because we're so afraid of each other. We're not really in relationship.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Like whenever you say, "How are you doing today?" We're like, "Do you really want to know?" And the person asking is kind of like, "Man, I hope she doesn't."
but they're asking and they're walking by you.
Yeah,
in the how are you doing?
Not even
There's no
waiting
time to
for a
stop.
response.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
So you can't foster mercy in that environment,
Right.
Yeah.
right? And so, and I think too, we're scared of tension, and tension is required. You know, one of your marriage segments, it was like, hey, embrace the fact that it's going to be high, low, up, down.
Yes.
But we're afraid of the tension. And again, my industry of mainstream media is just, forgive the pun, but hell bent
Yes,
on dividing us based on our differences. Like we're not drawn together by the things that make us the same, and we're afraid to embrace even our differences.
Right.
We're told we're not allowed to, right? So I think mercy can't survive in that type of an environment.
Right. I agree.
That was a great point that you made, you know, with mercy. If you don't have a relationship, you know, that is so important. You know, it's hard to do when you don't have a relationship. We can do it to our families, our children, because we got that relationship, but for strangers, it's a little bit harder to embrace.
Right. You can yell at someone and not think twice about it.
The lady in the car today.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more on The Christian View. Welcome back to The Christian View. Just a little joke. Monica just asked me how I responded to the lady in the car this morning, and I was actually like, Lord, thank you, and I smiled at her and waved and let her go on. I was like, I'm going to be tested on mercy and grace because we're talking about it today. But I mean, it's so true. God is going to test us, and we're all going to be held accountable for our actions. But I wanted to bring in, since we're talking about mercy and grace and the lack of it, my husband brought up about NFL players and professional players being taken down from their positions because of things that are happening outside of their jobs, whether it be domestic violence or addictions. And not that I am for domestic violence at all or addictions, but do we have the right lead to have people lose their positions or something they've worked really hard for things that they've done like 5 years from now, 20 years ago, or things that they do that we just don't agree with?
Right. The short answer would be no. But however, we do know that we live in a society where we have laws, and then depending on your particular trade or profession, you may have ethics or professional guidelines that you must adhere to. So sometimes, you know, whatever you do, you know you may violate this moral code. But I do feel that, you know, we as a society, when we say talking about the mercy, when we enact mercy, it means that we're not giving the punishment piece that really should truly go along with it. And I think in society sometimes I'm not, you know, really on the legislative side to know what all goes behind a law or to get all the thought processes. But from my vantage point, sometimes the punishment doesn't fit the crime. For instance, there was a young man I was hearing on the news. He was an educator, and there was something that happened with him with a student recently. You know, a sexual act. Yes, that's terrible. He shouldn't have done it. Career and all those things. But when I heard his sentence was life in prison, and I was going like, now, yeah, he needs a consequence, but does that punishment fit the crime? You know, so sometimes I do think that, you know, the short answer is no, we should be able to. But yes, there are certain professions where we have to be, you know, held accountable.
Right, and there is consequences to sin. There's consequences to things that we take out of order. But are we the judge and jury? You know,
no, we're not.
Well, you know, I put a post out on my IG page, and it says we've got to stop condemning people for things that God has already forgiven them for.
Yes.
And a lot of times, you know, just such as, you know, prisoners who've gone and they've served their time and they paid back their debt to society, but when they come out, they still can't get a job. They still can't provide for their families. They can't have that fresh start, you know, at a new life because of the fact that there is still something dangling over their head. And it's like, I can't run away from my past. And so I really think that, you know, we've got to do a better job at saying, okay, if this person has paid their debt to society, and if God has forgiven them, then why are we condemning them for what God has already forgiven them for? And then again, we've got to look at ourselves, because let's be honest, if we were to turn ourselves inside out, woo, you will find some ugly, ratchet stuff in there. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I hear you.
And so, we always tend to want God to pull the curtain, when it's us.
Right.
But when it's somebody else, sometimes we're the first ones, as with Jesus going to the cross yelling, crucify him, kill him. He's not the Son of God, knowing what he has done for us. And so, but we've got to remember that none of us have done anything to deserve God's grace.
Right, amen, amen.
None of us have done anything to deserve his grace, but he has given it to us. And like Pastor says, we get brand new mercies every day. So God is trying to get us to the place where we extend mercies to everybody else.
And one thing you said about the people getting out of prison, I have a dear person whom I love, just got out of prison about 6 months ago, and that label is still on him, and he has to carry it every day. I'm like, you've been forgiven. So forgive yourself, because when it keeps coming back up, it's hard for them to forgive it, because and I'm like, don't let the devil continue to remind you, even though the world may say this. God says this, and we have to, and you have to show yourself mercy and grace.
That's a trick of the enemy, so that you cannot forgive yourself, so you can't get over it. You know, even when the world is already hard on you, you're harder on yourself. You know,
and that's one thing he said. He goes, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for my past." And I said, "No, you don't, because God forgave you. So walk in that freedom, but it's hard."
And he paid for the past.
He did.
He paid for the past, the present, and the future. And that's what people have to understand. But it's going to start with, as Sister Danzy stated earlier, renewing your mind. You've got to see yourself in a new light. And a lot of times when you have done things wrong, you're harder on yourself than others are. And like you said, he came out with that label. We've got to learn to allow people to have a fair chance to start over, because we've been given another chance. Every time we take another breath, that's another chance to start over. So we've got to extend that to other people, and we got to stop criticizing for people for stuff that we ourselves are doing sometimes.
And one thing is, you might have done something 20 years ago, but you're a different person now. And we need to look at that person with new eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what the Bible says. We are new creatures. The old things have passed away, and behold, all things are become new. And so we've got to walk in that. And we have to sometimes tell people, that'll come up and call me, what I used to be. Sweetheart, that's not me anymore. That's not, you're not even, as I sit here, something is changing about me. I'm not even the same Christina I was when I got on this stage. Something is literally changing about me already. So don't refer to me, don't identify me by my dilemma, basically, is what we've got to stop doing. Absolutely.
Well, I love that "are become new," because that "are become" is so important. And some translations don't translate it that way.
That's right.
"Are become" is a present progressive
Yes, exactly.
So it's constantly going from glory to glory, right? And I think, too, what would be very beneficial is if the church would rise up and work alongside your state legislatures to provide an outlet in jobs programs, oversee them, align with the government, and propose legislation. I got to tell you, I work with women coming off the streets of prostitution. And I love the fact that we're now starting to refer to prostitutes as people who are being trafficked, because let's face it, no 7-year-old grows up to say, I think that's what I want to do. So,
I'm going to have to hold on. We'll be right back with more on the Christian View. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Christian View. We are talking about the lack of mercy and grace in our society. And before we went to break, Monica was making a great point that I want to jump back in on about the prostitution and the trafficking women that you're working with.
Right. Well, so women that I'm working with have a very difficult time leaving that past behind. And the church at large does not do a very good job of discipling these women. The are progressive, the are becoming in Christ, right? The present progressive. And so, and a lot of the programs are so victim centric that it's like walking in every day to a program that says, "Hi, my name is Monica and I'm a prostitute." It's like, no, my name is Monica and Christ delivered me from being a prostitute, right? And so if there were programs in place that would allow these records to be expunged to an extent, right? Because let's face it, like you were saying, you can't walk into an employer. It follows you everywhere like a
get
bag.
an apartment. You can't.
Right.
You
And so
can't.
it's
Right.
one thing for us to say Jesus forgives you, and it's like that's awesome, but I need a job.
Right, right. I need to be able to
I need
work.
to pay my bills.
Right.
So I think the legislature, I'd love to see the church step out of being so victim-centric, where we keep people in their bondage, and so afraid of politics because we're afraid of losing our tax breaks, you know, and step on out there and say, this is what's right. Like we've been called to occupy.
But Monica, most people have forgotten about the fundamental message of who Jesus was himself. He was not a person who stayed within the box. He was always getting outside of the box. And even in what you're speaking of, you know, he embraced Mary Magdalene, who we know he had cast out many devils, and we know what her past, you know, was what she was infamous for. But he did not allow that to change him. And I'm sure even in her, you know, our becoming, there was some struggles that we don't read about in the Bible, that things she had, and Jesus had to help keep her on the straight and narrow. But we have to be willing to work with people. But so many times I think we're fearful of people, and we're fearful of the reputation that it's gonna, you know, give us. If I associate with this person, what are people gonna think about me? It must mean I'm doing this or I'm doing that. No, it's just that we have been empowered, that since we have received his mercy, now we should be able to willing and show it.
I mean, when you look at the disciples that Jesus chose, I mean, they all represented something that was viewed on as negatively, you know. So you do question, you know, is your life a true reflection of who Jesus was when you want to just circle yourself with the high and mighty? You know, then you're not really following that path.
Well, I go out on the streets in Buckhead some, and I talk to the homeless and share with them, and what they say to me is, I prefer to be homeless. Because it's easier for me to be homeless than to try to get a job and to try to find a place to live, because they're not giving you any grace.
But honestly, they have more family and community under bridges than they do in our own churches or, you know, in their own families. And so it becomes a community. It is a lot of people don't want to be saved.
That's true.
Not off the street.
Exactly.
I wanted to piggyback off of something that Pastor Adams was mentioning, Mary Magdalene. And of course we know her background. But the thing that people often overlook is that she had value. There was still value to her, even though she had a rap sheet. And there's still value. There's still something on the inside of you that is very valuable to God. There is still value in people who have gone to jail for committing crimes such as drugs or selling drugs or rape. There's some value. There's something in there that God can use in that person to help somebody else. But we're so hard on them until they often revert back to being who they
that's
are.
The only choice they feel
Exactly.
they have.
And so identifying people by their dilemma has been going on way before we got here. It's in the Bible. The woman with the issue of blood. Her name was Veronica. Call me by my name. The lame man, you know, call me. And the man with the palsy, they identified people by what they were going through. Instead of just calling them who they are. Give me, I was assigned a name. So call me by my name, not by my issue.
But the thing is, we all have a rap sheet. We all have things in our past that, gosh, I just wish I didn't have. I wish I didn't do. I wish I didn't say. I wish they didn't see. So as believers, what can we do to be the first to act in grace and mercy instead of the first to condemn and judge and to cut down and to gossip? I mean, it's happening amongst us, so what can we do as believers to stop it?
Embrace them and also show the world that you know, if you have a reputation or an issue, whatever, I'm not going to look down at you. I think there is a sense of Christian hypocrisy in a sense, you know, where we're looking down at others and we think that, you know, they think that we think that we're better than them because we won't extend our hand out to them. So I think the first step is really to embrace those that are coming from a different background and, you know, showing them, you know, that we are one in that sense.
And in that, when we have that, like you said, that hypocrisy, the treatment or the cure for that is we must utilize empathetic intelligence. And that's where we are able to look at and we're able to view people and not be biased. And we can do that by just putting in a simple practice of what I call shoe shifting. You know, meaning like putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. But a lot of people are afraid to do that because they're scared to get out of their shoes and think about it from somebody else's juxtaposition, because at the end of the day, it's the caught and the uncaught.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, people that, there are plenty of people that did something that they should be behind bars for, but because they didn't get caught,
Right.
you know, and somebody else got caught in theirs, but we want to put it to a life sentence or hold it over their life forever, and we forget we did the same thing.
We did.
Yes.
Right. But no one saw us.
Yes.
Yeah.
God saw him.
God saw. God
he
sees
did.
everything.
Yes, he did.
But yeah, we're just so quick to point the finger when we should be pointing it inward. We point it outward.
I don't think we forget. I think that's what I think that's what enables us to continue to be hateful and merciless is that we know what we've done.
Right.
And we know when we haven't taken that thing before him to lay it down and let him contend with us in our private time. And so that's the measure by which we judge others is what we hold ourselves to inwardly. Exactly.
Self-projection.
So I think it has to start in your own mirror with your own relationship and practicing, you know, the scriptures of love, like mercy is, like replace love with mercy. They're interchangeable. They're all God.
And Jesus said, with love and kindness have I drawn thee. And he did not put specifications on who he would draw. Because he said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men. Doesn't matter if you raped somebody or killed somebody. He said, I'll draw all men if I be lifted up. And so the church first has to start with having these honest conversations about being transparent. I'm the pastor, but I'm not perfect. I'm the pastor, but sometimes I battle depression. I'm the pastor, but sometimes I battle maybe wanting to go get a drink or something like that. You start with being transparent, because once you confess these faults, then that gives the devil nothing to hold over your head. There's nothing to hold over your head because you're confessing it.
Once you turn on the light, there's freedom. And
I think of Luke 6:42. How can you say to your brother, brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when yourself failed to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
That's powerful. That is powerful. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with a Christian view on the topic mercy and grace. Welcome back to the Christian View. We've been talking today about the lack of mercy and grace in our society. There's over 38 verses that talks about mercy and grace in Scripture. My favorite is this one. He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. We'll see you next week on the Christian View.